This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to part 1.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a travel company employee and a customer. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello?
Hi, good morning. This is Talia from Parrot Bay Travel Agency. Is Robert Goddard there?
Yes, speaking.
I'm so sorry that I made such an early phone call, and I'm calling to ask a few questions about your most recent vacation. Could I have 5 minutes of your time?
Sure thing.
Great, thanks. Now, I see here that you visited Melbourne. Was this your first visit to Melbourne?
No, I have actually been there twice before.
I see. Now, what would you say was your favourite part about Melbourne?
Well, I did like seeing the exotic wildlife, and there are great sights to see, but I have to say I was most impressed by the amazing weather.
Yeah, the weather there is amazing. Which of the sites listed as part of our official tour did you see? And of those, which was your favourite?
First I saw the theatre, which was beautifully designed. It was not nearly as cool as the town hall, though. The building is a huge part of Melbourne's history. Definitely my favourite. I saw the aquarium too, but wasn't too impressed.
I see. Yes, people often have great reviews of Town Hall. Now, I would like to ask you about your dining experience. Did you enjoy the food there?
Absolutely, I loved it.
I'm glad to hear it. Could you tell me a little bit about what you most enjoyed about the food?
Being such an international city, I loved the variety. I could find any type of food I wanted, whether I wanted seafood, burgers, or anything else. You name it, and they had it.
Did you drive to Melbourne?
No, I flew. I thought about going by train, but in the interest of time, I decided to go by plane.
Right, I see.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
And would you mind telling me whether you are under 20, between the ages of 20 and 40, or older than 40?
It would be nice if I was still under 20. My vacation probably would have been quite different. Actually, though, I just turned 41 last week.
Oh, happy birthday. So, did you treat yourself and fly first class?
No way. I would love to have a budget that high. I'm more in the mid-range income level. I wasn't always, though. I spent much of my life in a low-income household.
I see. That answers my next question then, of income level. And what was the purpose of this visit?
I had to go there on business a lot before and decided I would go there for tourism this time.
I see. And what is your occupation?
I am mainly a computer programmer. I also write for a travel magazine on the side, which is why I visited Melbourne before, but it's not my main source of income.
I see. Wow, it sounds like you work a lot.
Yes, I am very busy, which is exactly why I took a nice week-long vacation to Melbourne.
I completely agree. Would you care to comment on your accommodation?
My hotel was a good value. Staying in the city can get really expensive, so it was nice to find such a good price for the location and quality. I'm glad I didn't end up in some cheap motel in the middle of nowhere.
I'm glad you didn't either. Well, thank you for taking part in our survey, and I'm glad you enjoyed your vacation.
No problem. Take care.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1.
You will hear the education officer of a dinosaur museum giving information to some teachers who are planning a school visit. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello, and thank you for asking me to your teachers' meeting to talk about the Dinosaur Museum and to tell you a bit about what you can do with your students there. Well, let me give you some of the basic information first. In regard to opening hours, we're open every day of the week from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. except on Mondays, when we close at 1:30 p.m. And in fact, the only day in the year when we're closed is on the 25th of December. You can book a guided tour for your school group any time that we're open. If you bring a school group to the museum, when you arrive, we ask you to remain with your group in the car park. One or more of the tour guides will welcome you there and brief you about what the tour will be about. We do this there because our entrance is quite small and we really haven't got much room for briefing groups in the exhibition area. As far as the amount of time you'll need goes, if you bring a school group, you should plan on allowing a minimum of 90 minutes for the visit. This allows 15 minutes to get on and off the coach, 45 minutes for the guided tour, and 30 minutes for after-tour activities. If you're going to have lunch at the museum, you will of course have to allow more time. There are 2 cafes in the museum with seating for 80 people. If you want to eat there, you'll need to reserve some seating, as they can get quite crowded at lunchtime. Then, outside the museum at the back, there are tables, and students can bring their own lunch and eat it there in the open air.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
When the students come into the museum foyer, we ask them to check in their backpacks with their books, lunchboxes, etc. at the cloakroom before they enter the museum proper. I'm afraid in the past we have had a few things gone missing after school visits, so this is a strict rule. Also, some of the exhibits are fragile, and we don't want them to be accidentally knocked. But we do provide school students with handouts with questions and quizzes on them. There's so much that students can learn in the museum, and it's fun for them to have something to do. Of course, they'll need to bring something to write with for these. We do allow students to take photographs. For students who are doing projects, it's useful to make some kind of visual record of what they see that they can add to their reports. And finally, they should not bring anything to eat into the museum or drinks of any kind. There are also a few things that students can do after the tour. In the theaterette on the ground floor, there are continuous screenings of short documentaries about dinosaurs which they can see at any time. We used to have an activity room with more interactive things like making models of dinosaurs and drawing and painting pictures, even hunting for dinosaur eggs. But unfortunately, the room was damaged in a bad storm recently when water came in the roof, so that's closed at the moment. But we do have an IT centre where students have access to CD-ROMs with a range of dinosaur games. These games are a lot of fun, but they also teach the students about the lives of dinosaurs, how they found food, protected their habitat, survived threats, that kind of thing. And I think that's all I have to tell you. Please feel free to ask any questions if you would like to know anything else about.
That is the end of Part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 2.
You will hear a seminar with Dr. Martin Merriweather of the Antarctic Centre in Christchurch, New Zealand. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
We're pleased to welcome Dr. Martin Merriweather of the Antarctic Centre in Christchurch, New Zealand, who has come along to talk to us today about the role of the centre and the Antarctic Treaty. Now, my first question is about the choice of location for the centre. Why Christchurch? Was it because of the climate?
Well, actually, New Zealand is the second closest country to Antarctica, and Christchurch is often used on Antarctic expeditions.
Right, so it's because of where we are, coupled with our historical role. So tell us, what is the main purpose of the centre?
Oh, well, we have two complementary roles. One is as a scientific base for expeditions and research, and the other is as an information centre.
Tell us something about the role as a scientific base.
Well, we're able to provide information about what scientists should take with them to the South Pole. For example, the centre contains a clothing warehouse where expeditions are supplied with suitable clothing for the extreme conditions.
I suppose you need a bit more than your normal winter coat.
Yes, exactly. And then there's also the specialist library and mapping services.
Right. And which countries are actually located at the centre?
Well, the centre houses research programs for New Zealand, for the United States, as well as for Italy. There's even a US post office at the American Air Force Base here.
Really? And what does the Visitors Centre offer?
Well, since very few people will ever experience the Antarctic firsthand, the Visitors Centre aims to recreate the atmosphere of Antarctica. There's a mock campsite where you can see inside an Antarctic tent and imagine yourself sleeping there. And the centre also acts as a showcase for the unique international cooperation which exists in Antarctica today.
What is it actually like at the South Pole? I know you've been there on a number of occasions.
Yes, I have. And each time I'm struck by the awesome beauty of the place. It's magnificent, but you can really only visit it in the summer months.
October to March.
Yes, because it's completely dark for 4 months of the year. And, in addition, it has to be the coldest place on Earth.
Colder than the North Pole? Why is that?
Well, unlike the North Pole, which is actually a frozen sea, Antarctica is a landmass shaped like a dome, with the result that the winds blow down the slopes at speeds of up to 150 kilometres an hour. And that's what makes it so cold.
Oh.
And one other interesting thing is that Antarctica is the driest continent on Earth, surprisingly, and so you have to drink large amounts of water when you're there.
How old is Antarctica?
Oh, we're pretty sure it was part of a larger landmass, but it broke away from the rest of the continent 170 million years ago.
How can you be certain of this?
Because fossils and rocks have been discovered in Antarctica, which are the same as those found in places such as Africa and Australia.
Amazing. To think that it was once attached to Africa.
Before you hear the rest of the interview, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Now, let's just have a look at the Antarctic Treaty. How far back does the idea of an international treaty go?
Well, as far back as the 19th century, when 11 nations organised an international event.
When was that exactly?
In 1870, and it was called the Polar Research Meeting. And then, not long after that, they organised something called the First International Polar Year.
And that took place when exactly?
Over 2 years, from 1882 to 1883. But it wasn't until the 1950s that the idea of an international treaty was proposed. And in 1959, the treaty was actually signed.
What do you see as the main achievements of the treaty?
Well, firstly, it means that the continent is reserved for peaceful use.
That's Article 1, isn't it?
Yes.
That's important, since the territory belongs to everyone.
Yes, but not as important as Article 5, which prohibits any nuclear explosions or waste disposal.
Which is marvellous. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to stop there because I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thanks for coming along today and telling us all about the centre and its work.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.
You will hear a talk on a survey on improving the local hospital service. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning. Today, I'd like to discuss the results of our patient survey. We have reviewed the data collected in order to measure the strengths and weaknesses of our hospital and to determine potential future plans for improvement. The first question on the survey attempted to determine the main reason that patients choose to come to our hospital for treatment rather than others in the vicinity. The data showed that even though our hospital is not as centrally located as others, we offer a very good transportation service that enables patients to travel here by bus or train free of charge. Despite there being other hospitals that are larger with more facilities than ours, we still have higher patient numbers. The second question on the survey asked what quality patients hoped for most when visiting the hospital. There were 5 choice options, including short waiting times and friendly service from nurses. However, the data collected showed that most patients hoped that the hospital is clean when they visit it. It seemed that patients were not concerned with the clarity of signs and notices in the hospital, as this option got the smallest number of votes. They were, however, very keen to be given prior information by the staff about hospital treatments. Using the data collected from our survey, we have developed a list of actions that will be adopted within the next year. A main focus of these improvements is our website, which is currently very outdated. We will not only update our in-hospital service for the use of the medical staff, but also our main service so that local residents can also benefit from it. We hope that this new service will attract a large number of new patients. It is clear from the feedback that many members of staff are unhelpful towards patients and inefficient when carrying out their tasks. We feel that some incentive is needed to boost motivation to perform better, and so we are implementing a system whereby staff will be awarded an extra bonus for their success. The member of staff who has received the most bonuses at the end of the year will be announced as Staff Member of the Year. We will continue to monitor progress on this issue through patient feedback forms, so that the opinions of our visitors will constantly be taken into consideration. Another issue that the survey has brought to light is the long delays experienced by visitors awaiting treatment, with some visitors reporting waiting times of up to 5 hours. This is unacceptable. We need to improve the effectiveness of communication between patients, doctors and staff, so we have decided to implement a ticketing system. This means that patients are seen on a first-come, first-served basis and will never have to wait more than 2 hours to be seen by a doctor. The final topic that I want to cover in the lecture is the recommendations that we have put forward for future improvements to the hospital. Firstly, we intend to be the first hospital in the country to build a new unit for those suffering from sleep disturbance, which is a relatively common illness affecting up to 6% of the population. Whilst we are a hospital primarily treating patients with illnesses and injuries, we cannot ignore the significant income that those in need of plastic surgery could bring to the hospital. We will, therefore, also be proposing a new ward to give patients access to this increasingly popular treatment. After much discussion about the quality and suitability of our equipment, we have decided that it is advanced enough to cope with the treatments that we offer, and that our spending should be directed to other areas where it will have a more significant impact. We feel that more effective planning is needed to improve the efficiency of the forms of communication that patients have with us. Therefore, patients who have received treatment will receive an email link to a survey that they can fill out online. This will eradicate meaningless paperwork and will also enable us to digitally monitor the data collected. Now, if anyone has any questions.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.